Manchester City versus the Premier League has taken yet another intriguing turn. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. Yes, today's video is going to centre from the breaking news yesterday that Manchester City are taking the Premier League to court over associated party transaction rules. Yes, Manchester City versus the Premier League is a rivalry that is set to go down in absolute incredible history. The 115 charges are somewhat separate from this, but we will allude to them a little later. But this is something a little bit different, which City are taking the Premier League to court over, where if they win, it could have significant change to the top flight division's financial rulings. It could make for very interesting viewing going forward as well. So we're going to be trying to talk all about this, trying to talk about in its simplest of forms, I guess you could say. But without further ado, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things are always very greatly appreciated. Get involved in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it. That will make for great interest in reading on this particular topic. I'm sure you have a lot to say about this down below. So please do get involved. Without further ado, let's get on with the video. Let's talk Manchester City and them taking the Premier League to court. A hearing is set to begin on June the 10th. And the ramifications of this, should Manchester City win and have enough about them to go on and win, could reshape the Premier League financial structure as we currently know it. We've been calling out for a reshaping the structure. We do feel like certain things are pushed against certain teams and things of that nature. But Manchester City feel that the current associated party transaction rules are discriminatory between of them, you know, Man City. It does sound very weird and hard to believe because obviously we know that there's 115 charges looming over Manchester City, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't victims somewhere along the line of the financial regulations that are currently in our game. Associated party transaction rules are essentially rules that have been in place for years, and to put it simply, they are just rules that allow ownerships to, of course, explore sponsorship links and things of that nature. So a quote from The Athletic here is that the clubs initially voted for a temporary suspension of APT. By the way, APT, we're hearing so many financial acronyms this year alone. FFP, PSR, and now APT seems to be the latest buzz acronym. It's just weird to me. Clubs initially voted for a temporary suspension of APT, but eventually agreed on a framework which would see all associated party transactions subjected to a fair market value test. Essentially, teams would have to prove that any deal was financially justifiable to all parties based on the going rate. So basically, a state ownership would have a lot of influence in that particular area. State ownership would obviously have a lot of influence in certain sponsorship deals, basically. But they'd have to prove it's justifiable from them and not basically money pumped from them through a third party into the club. That is essentially what it is saying, because otherwise a lot of state ownership places and teams who are state owned could obviously heavily influence that. Manchester City being one, Newcastle being another, and that's why he goes on to. That's why there is talk about a suspension, a temporary suspension, very early on in the days of that, because obviously the rules quickly tightened up when Newcastle United were taken over back in 2021. When that takeover happened, that's when clubs and the Premier League started to have real big fears that maybe their financial rulings and regulations weren't exactly as watertight as what they first thought, even though they should have really seen that when Manchester City got taken over. But, you know, you live and you learn. The majority of teams agreed to these types of rulings. One that did not was, of course, Manchester City. Manchester City said that have been talking about maybe going to court with the Premier League for a while over this. And they seemingly are suggesting that this is a breach of competition. Basically saying, we have the influence, we are the lottery winners. Why can't we flaunt and use our money and our influence to the best of our ability? It's a fair argument, some may say. I don't know. You are lottery winners at the end of the day, so I don't know. Maybe that's the reason why. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time. I don't know. Just basically, it's a breach of competition. They feel discriminated by it. And they've been actually talking about this since February. Since February of this year, there was obviously a different set of rules being put in place for this kind of thing. And City felt that they were deemed rushed kind of rules. They were deemed to be rushed and not very much thought out, especially on their part. And the damages of this could obviously be telling for the Premier League, but on a different scale. Not only will there be question marks over the Premier League's validity, but also there'll be even more so because City will then seek damages for losses they claim to have suffered since APT obviously became a thing and the laws were introduced on that. As far as the rest of the Premier League goes, City could find allies in Newcastle United because obviously, like I said earlier, with them being state-owned, they'll have a lot of influence in this particular area as well. So I imagine they'll be following this case with very much the same level of intrigue as obviously City. And I think there are maybe a few other clubs as well that might be also taking a very strong interest in this. Because, like I say, if City win, that may open the gateway for a more relaxed sort of APT regulation. And of course, that could bring in a lot more sponsorships for these types of clubs, a lot more influence, and, you know, could open the gateway to more money being involved in the game, and obviously more things of this nature. So we'll see obviously how this develops, and obviously how the spending cap in 2026 that's going to come in is going to affect things. But it could be very interesting, this whole court case. And, you know, like I say, it could open up more opportunity for investment and sponsorships and therefore more money-making opportunities. If City lose, nothing really changes except the ever so worsening relationship between Manchester City and the Premier League. We know that obviously the 115 charges are still looming over the club, and, you know, one way or another, that's not going to exactly aid the relationship there. So the fear is that if City lose this case and City lose the 115 charges case, it's possible that the relationship with Manchester City and the Premier League will be so sour, will be so destroyed by this lack of trust and this whole sort of thing, that maybe City could start the Super League again. Maybe City could join Barcelona and Real Madrid, who are seemingly so adamant on getting this Super League idea off the ground, that maybe City could be another big influencer in that, to try and break away from the Premier League and obviously be the sort of top dogs in that league so that they can actually run the rules of that. So it'd be interesting to see what exactly happens from this. But a lot of people have been saying whether the 115 charges actually are in alignment with this. And they sort of are to an extent, because if the Athletic goes on to state that if City's court case here is successful, if City win this case, it could arguably strengthen their case for the 115 charges. And if that is the case, that's a big worry for everybody, including myself, who has obviously said they're guilty. They're guilty. They're definitely guilty. It might change the tide a little bit in that particular case. We all, or majority of us, think they are guilty. Whether it's by a little or a lot or somewhere in the middle, we all think they are guilty somewhere along the line of that 115 charges. But we don't know to the full extent. if this is to be proven in Manchester City's favour, this could obviously strengthen their case. This could obviously mean that their defence in court might be aided by this, and it could mean that they're not as guilty as what was first thought. We shall see. We shall see. Overall, though, I just see this as another way to slow down the 115 charges thing. And I think that they will be able to get away with this. And I'm obviously not a legal person. I'm not a lawyer on this. I'm not obviously in tune with the laws of the game to the fullest of extents. But I'm not 100% sure how far they'll get with this. I'm not 100% sure how far this will go. One thing I do know, though, is that if they ever make a Netflix documentary on this, that is gonna be fire. That would be absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible to see a Netflix documentary on this. But no, in all seriousness, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how this case all goes going forward. Like I say, there's going to be a lot more riding on this than just it being Manchester City versus the Premier League. There's a lot more riding on it in terms of the financial structures of the modern day game within England's top flight division. Teams that will look to maybe exploit that if City go on and win. There's going to be allies for City. There are going to be teams that are against City. It's going to be very interesting, and I'm very much interested to gauge the opinion of you guys, because do you see this as a way of City dragging their heels even more about the bigger case that's on the horizon in the form of 115 charges? Do you see this being a way for City to try and obviously maneuver some leeway in that parent case, so to speak? Or is this just a genuine battle that they genuinely believe in? Do they genuinely believe that they're being hard done by these rules and that it's not fair on them? Considering, of course, that the major thread of this is because of City's revenue incomings this past year, or these past couple of years, should we say. Last year, I think they recorded record highs, even higher than Manchester United in terms of revenue and income and stuff. And I get that, you know, the amount of competitions they won in terms of winning the treble would have obviously accumulated to a large part of that sum. But to say that it is higher than some of the more established English teams in the game just seems a bit strange and a bit fishy to me. Just seems very strange to me that would be the case. Like, I understand you would be one of the top dogs and top earners because obviously you had an incredible season. I understand that your growth over the past 10 to 15 years or so has been incredible. I understand your reach has obviously grown so much over that period of time that, yes, there would be a growth in your revenues and incomings. But to say that you're going to be higher than the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United, despite obviously those three clubs having an up and down past decade or so, still seems very strange to me and strange to a lot of people that would be the case. But that's just like seemingly a small element of it. The overall arching thing is seemingly that they want, obviously, these rules to change. They are keen to stress that they still want some form of regulation to be in place, but they just want the grip that they seemingly are saying they are under just loosened just a little bit in terms of, obviously, these kinds of regulations and laws and things of that nature. So it's going to be very interesting. It will also be interesting to see the knock-on effect of this case, whether or not they then go after UEFA, who have a similar sort of thing, I believe. I'm not sure. One of them's a little bit more looser than the other, but it'll be interesting to see what does happen there, because there could be threat of, again, if City go after UEFA and lose, they could actually be knocked out of the knocked out of Champions League football going forward. So I think it could be very interesting to see the knock-on effect of this, and it'll be interesting to see how the other teams fare and feel on this. And if I'm right in thinking, I think the Premier League meeting that they have annually every year is tomorrow. I'm recording this on Wednesday. I think tomorrow, Thursday the 6th, I think is where they're having the Premier League's annual meeting. So that could be interesting as well. That whatever's going to come out of that meeting as well is going to be very interesting, because I imagine this is going to be near the top of the agenda at least. I think they're going to decide on VAR as well. So tomorrow is going to be a massive day for the Premier League in terms of this story, VAR, and who knows what else is going to be popping up in that particular meeting. So do keep your eyes on that one. It's going to be a very interesting next few days for the Premier League to see what comes out of that meeting, to see what comes out in the aftermath of this Manchester City versus Premier League battle. And of course everything else in between. But we'll try and keep on top of it as best we can. We'll try and obviously talk about the biggest stories from the world of football, and especially from the Premier League where we can. But the bottom line here is that Manchester City and the Premier League are going to court yet again over Associated Party Transaction Rules, APT. There's the latest acronym for you, APT. And one last thing I will say, The Athletic does finish off with that this could mean bad news for the Premier League. Apparently they're already being stretched as much as it is, having to deal with all the FFP stuff, the 115 charges and everything else in between. Adding this onto the agenda is not exactly ideal for them at this time. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting times for the Premier League, and I don't know if they're going to be calling in any backup at this time. But the one thing I will say is that if they lose this battle, and then they lose the 115 charges battle, how can the Premier League continue to function and run their own organisation? That's the question I pose to you. How can they do that? If they lose both of these big and key battles, how can the Premier League continue to function the way that it is? Because if they don't win them, the validity of the Premier League needs to be called into question. The overall sporting merit of the competition needs to be called into question. If they lose these battles, the Premier League being stretched as much as it is, how can the Premier League continue to run their association the way that it is being run? In my opinion, they can't. In my personal opinion, they can't. But we'll obviously have to wait and see what the future holds for Manchester City versus the Premier League. Like I said, the Netflix documentary on this, if they are going to probably make one, would be absolute fire. But we'll obviously wait and see what this courtroom drama has to unfold for us later on down the line. Remember, it starts Monday, June the 10th. The Premier League meetings tomorrow. June the 10th is where the court case begins. It's going to be very interesting, to say the least. But those are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of this Manchester City versus Premier League courtroom battle, which is set to unfold over APT? Let me know what you guys think and feel down below in the comment section on this. I'm sure you have a lot of interesting thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it. That make for great and interesting reading, I'm sure. Otherwise, hit the like button on the way out if you enjoy the video. Subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things are always and forever greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video, and I was going to speak to you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your night. Speak to you again very, very soon.